welcome back to the IBC Guys, where we're just a couple of beggars trying to help other beggars find the bread. So, Mike Stevens just informed me that he has no jokes to tell me. So, we're off to a bad start. We're also doing this episode for the second time. We got lagged out the first time, so hopefully this will go a little bit better. But we have a very good episode. So, the name of this, or the title of this episode is How Banks Are Stealing Your Family's Wealth. Scandalous. But it's true, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The second reason the episode today is really good is Mike has promised. He's going to be working on the whiteboard. So I'm going to do my best to articulate what he's writing up there. He's going to do a good job talking through it, though, as well. But for those two reasons, learning how banks are stealing your wealth and learning and watching how it actually is done, this is going to be a good episode. So, Mike, we're going to go through and talk about the banking function itself, what it does, how they make money, how they calculate their rate of return. And then, the premise of the entire podcast itself is how IBC can change all that. So we'll talk through how IBC maybe can do this in a better way that's more beneficial for the individual rather than for the bank. There's a novel idea. So we'll talk about that, and then I'll have some takeaways and some applications at the end. But I've yapped for a good amount of time. Mike, how are banks stealing our family's wealth?
Yeah, so I'm going to go through how banks make money and then ultimately what our desire is to help you take control of the banking function in your life. So when you understand how banks make money and the function that the banks have, you're going to want to take control of the banking function. So first of all, how banks make money. So let's say that you deposit money into your bank. So the banks, there's two components of the banking function. One is the depositors and one is the borrowers. So we're going to deposit $100,000 into the bank, and they're going to pay us 1% interest.
1%.
Okay, on that money, 1%. So the banks are paying out $1,000 a year for that 1%. Okay, fair enough. Now, banks make money is they take that money on deposit and then they turn around and they put it to work in the form of a loan. So let's say they have $100,000 in loans, write loans here. And Dave, do they lend that money out at 1%?
I have no loan or have never experienced a loan at 1%. So no, that's not what they do.
No. So they're going to lend it out. Let's just say they loan it out at 5%.
I think that's fair.
5%. Whether it's a mortgage or a car loan or line of credit or what have you, 5%. So most people would think that, well, if they're taking money in and paying out 1% and they're loaning it out at 5%, they're making 4% off of your money. I'm going to show you that that's not even close to what they're making. So if they have $100,000 out on loan at 5%, they're actually taking back in $5,000 a year, okay, in total interest on that loan. They're paying out $1,000 a year for your money on deposit. So that is a profit of $4,000 profit. Okay, and if you have a $4,000 profit on a $1,000 investment, that is a ROI of 400% return on investment. 400%, not 4, but 400. Then when you look at the bank's ability to do this same thing 9 more times through what's called fractional reserve banking, which we won't get into on this podcast, but banks are making crazy amounts of money off of the money we have on deposit.
So can I pause and summarize? Can I pause and summarize a little bit? So I think
absolutely.
the average person, and maybe you're listening to this episode and you already knew this, but I think the average person would look at the 1% and compared to the 5%, the bank is making 4%, which they tend to be okay with. But I think oftentimes gets lost is that it's in comparison to what you originally started with. If they're originally starting with 1% and they're making 5%, that is a 400% increase. If I were to say, would you rather have a 4% increase or a 400% increase on your money? I think it would be unanimous that someone would pick 400%. Those are dramatically different numbers. And then to Mike's point, fractional reserve banking, they get to do this over and over and over again with money they don't actually have in the bank. So they're taking money that you earned, you worked hard for, that you put into their institution, and they are loaning it out and making a ton of money. So is that a good summary, Mike, of kind of what you just said?
Yes.
So, which is that's bonkers. I mean, if you went and said, "I'll loan you money, but I don't have it," I don't know how well that would go over with whomever you were talking to. That's essentially what banks do, and there's ways they
Exactly.
justify that and things like that. But yeah, that's the point Mike's trying to make. That's how they're making their money.
So let's go through and with that, and I'm getting a little lag here again, but with that, I mean, if we could do this, would you not want to have your own banking system?
If I could be my own bank and make 400% on money, absolutely.
I mean, if you could deposit money into your bank and loan it out and make a 400% return, would you not want to do that?
Absolutely. Even if it was
Yeah, that's
maybe out of bitterness, Mike, if I knew that I wasn't giving the bank even 4% and I could make the 4%, I'd be okay with that. Not to be pessimistic, but uh, yes, the answer is an emphatic yes.
yes. So here's a question for you. So let's say we're going to deposit $50,000 into a bank, and they're not going to give us 1%. They're going to give us 4%
All right, a little better.
interest. Really good. Yeah, a lot better. And so you have $50,000 a year at the bank, earning 4% a year, and you want to go buy a truck. So you don't want to go, go borrow the money. You have $50,000 sitting in there. So why not go just pay cash for it and not have to pay the bank
Sure.
interest, right?
Yep.
So you go into the bank and you meet with your buddy there at the bank and you say, hey, I stopped in today. I'm going to take that $50,000 out to go buy a truck. And he says, Dave, why would you want to do that? That's a really good rate, that 4%, right? Why don't you leave that in there at 4%? And then I'm going to give you a loan for that $50,000 so you can go buy your truck. And then you're going to say, that sounds like a good idea, but what's the rate you're going to charge me? Okay. And let's say he says, well, I'm also going to charge you 4% interest. So you might say, well, that's kind of a wash. If I'm making 4% here and the loan's going to be 4% there, it's essentially a wash. Why don't I just take out
Yeah,
the money and
they
go buy the
look the
truck,
same.
right?
Yeah, on the surface they look the same.
They look the same. So let's see if they are the same. So let's pencil this out and let's see if they are the same. So you're $50,000 at 4%, and let's say over 5 years, which is a normal truck loan, let's say at 50%. I know some are at 50%, 5 years, 60 months. Some are 72 months or 6 years. But let's just say it's 5 years. That $50,000 at 4%. So take 50,000 times 1.04. At the end of the first year, you have 52,000, and then take the 52,000 times 1.04. It's compounding interest. You calculate that over 5 years, you will have $60,833 at the end of 5 years. Okay. Now let's look at the truck loan. You're going to have to amortize that out. And you can do that through a number of different free apps online. I like to use amortization-calc.com. It's a very simple amortization schedule. You put in $50,000 at 4% for 60 months. And at the end of that 60 months or 5 years, you will have paid $55,250 back to the bank. Okay? So if you look at the difference, you had $50,000 sitting in your bank at 4%. At the end of 5 years, you have $60,833. And then by the time you paid off your loan over 60 months, you paid the bank $55,250. So the difference of that is $5,583.
All right, I'm gonna pause you. Can I do that, Mike? I'm gonna kind of summarize
Yes.
for those listening that maybe can't see, as well as for people that maybe need to process a little more like me. On the left-hand side, you have $50,000 on the bank, and they're paying you 4% interest, which is crazy in and of itself. 4%, you're not going to get 4% interest. But for sake of example, that's what we have. And at the end of 5 years, you're going to end up with $60,833. Now, we were joking about this earlier, Mike. If there's anybody in this world that's going to go back and check your numbers, it's me, this guy. You know, what has two thumbs and checks Mike's answers? This guy, Dave. So those numbers are legit. I can tell you. You take them, do a simple interest on it, and you'll get 60,833. On the right hand side, you took a loan out of $50,000 at a 4% interest rate. And at the end of that loan, you will have paid back $55,250 to the bank. So essentially, the difference between what you would make in the left-hand column and what you would pay back in the right-hand column is $5,583. Is that an accurate summary, Mike?
Correct.
All right.
Correct. So one thing, let me show you when you were just mentioning that you're going to check me. Let me show you
Yeah,
one little trick
I've done it
on
already.
iPhone that somebody on my iPhone that I didn't know. Somebody told me this. So if you take 50,000, I know you probably can't see this, but
No, we can.
50,000 times 1.04, and that gives you the 52,000 there.
Sure.
Well, instead of going times 1.04 times 1.04, if you just hit the equal sign, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, that's the 60,832 and
You are
64
so
cents. So rounding up to
fancy.
60,833. So then let's take this over 20 years, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more years, and you go to year 10. So this is 74,012. Can you see this?
You're running out
Can
of
you see
room.
that okay?
Yeah, we can see it. You're just running out of room.
3, 4, 5. Year 15, it's 90,047. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more years. It's 109,556. Okay, so what I want to show here is once you pay, well, if you pay $50,000 for that truck, or you pay $55,000 for that truck to the bank financing it, that money has left your family forever, right? You
Yep.
write that check, you make those monthly payments back, it never comes back to your family. It's gone forever. For generations to come, that money will never
Yep.
come back to your family. However, if you leave your money sit here and have uninterrupted compounding, and then finance it with the bank at 4%, and yes, you're going to have to pay interest to the bank. You're going to pay $5,250 of interest.
Mm-hmm.
However, what's the return on that money? I paid $5,250 interest, but I made in the first 5 years $5,583. But then 15 years later, that number grows to 109,556. That's a pretty good rate of return. Would you agree?
Can I try and say it a different way? Would that be all right? So
Sure.
that 5583, Mike, that comes from taking what you would have in the account compared to what the loan would cost you, right? So the astute person would say it costs me less
Correct.
money, 5,500. It cost me $55,250 to borrow this money. In other words, I paid that, took a loan of 5,000, 50,000, paid that $50,000 back, 5,250. On the left-hand side is 60,833. Correct? So the difference is you made $5,583. Am I correct? And I think I just said the same thing, but that's what you're
Correct.
trying to get at, right? But the point of all this in the right-hand column for the
Correct.
loan, that money is gone forever from your family. You will never see that money again. And because, and I hate to be maybe crass, but everyone passes away, you have a finite amount of money in your lifetime. So that money is gone, gone forever. So no return on that 55,250 anymore at all. And to your point, the 60,883 or 33, excuse me, continues to grow into year 20. It's 109,556. Am I accurate in all that?
Correct. So
Yeah.
the idea is parking your money and getting that uninterrupted compounding forever, and then using someone else's money and paying that off. And at the end, you pay this off at the end of 5 years. I mean, then that money is gone, and then this is zero down the year
Yep.
20. There's nothing there.
It's
However,
gone.
this continues to compound year after year after year, and you can recycle that money. Then you can go and use that money again and again in your family. So how that works in the banking system. So I'm going to erase this. Anything else with this? I'm going to show you how this works with the IBC concept. Okay. So with IBC, the infinite banking concept, we're doing the same thing as we are parking our money inside of this policy. And again, the reason why we use a insurance policy is because it is the only financial vehicle in the United States that predates the tax code of 1913. This has been around for longer than the United States, longer than 250
Yeah.
years. So when they wrote the tax code of 1913 and formed the IRS, this was kind of, let's say, grandfathered in. So there's huge tax benefits of life insurance. That's why we're using this as our vehicle, as our kind of our banking system where we're
Sure.
depositing our money. I think everyone knows that the death benefit, whenever anyone receives a death benefit from a life insurance policy, it's tax-free. So that's why we're using the life insurance as a very specially designed life insurance policy to use it as our IBC vehicle, let's say. So within IBC, we're going to park that money there, and then we're going to use the insurance company's money to finance things. So let's take, for example, that $50,000 truck. Okay. So essentially, everyone's driving a vehicle, a car, truck, whatever it is. 90+% of the American population is financing those vehicles. Okay. So let's
Yeah.
say they're financing those vehicles. And let's say that $50,000 truck, if you're financing, so let's say this is option one and you're financing, okay? And let's say you buy a vehicle. I think the average people buy another vehicle once every 5 years, okay? So if you're financing a vehicle for $50,000, you're going to pay, let's say, $55,000 because you're going to pay interest to the bank. And you're going to do that once every 5 years. At the end of 20 years, you will have spent $220,000, right, have gone through 4 trucks, and you have 0 left to show for it. Okay.
I want to clarify. I want to clarify. You have IBC written at the top, and then you wrote the numbers for financing your truck. So that's not IBC.
We're not doing
So that's financing. The
Good
key
point.
point in all
So this
that
is loan.
is,
So this is, yeah.
yeah, the key point is
Option 1
financing
is you're
the
going to get a
loan.
loan.
Yeah, you don't have any money at the end of those loans. 4 trucks, you have $0 in the bank. You have 4 trucks, which is a depreciating asset, which is not great in the first place, and you have $0 to show for it. That's the loan option
Correct.
number 1.
Correct. So loan option. Option number 2 is you're going to pay cash for those vehicles. So you're going to save the $5,000 interest, but you're going to save up and buy that truck for cash. You're going to buy 1 vehicle every 5 years. Over the course of 20 years, you're going to buy 4 vehicles, just like the loan option. But instead of $220,000, you saved the $20,000 interest. So you paid $200,000 for your 4 $50,000 trucks.
Sure.
But at the end of that 20 years, you have the same
amount, nothing.
As option 1. You have 0.
Nothing. Yep.
That money has left your family forever. With the IBC method, and going back to what I showed earlier, where you park your money inside of a system, a financial vehicle that pays you 4%, and that's why I used 4%, because that's what you get inside the policy, give or take. We can go through the mechanics of that.
Sure. Yeah.
But then you can borrow that money from the insurance company using your money as collateral, and you kind of do the combination of both of these. So you're going to leave your money there compounding over that 20 years, but yet you're going to borrow it and you're going to pay the insurance company interest. So let's say that $55,000 per vehicle times 20 years, over 20 years, times 4 vehicles, you will have paid $220,000 for your vehicles. But here's the key difference. At the end of that 20 years, you're going to have about $220,000 left as compared to 0.
So, okay, back up, Mike, back up. What you're saying is that you can do exactly the same thing. Same price truck, 4 trucks over the course of 20 years. You'd spend $220,000. But what you're telling me is that you will have in your bank account approximately $220,000 at the end of those 20 years. And am I summarizing that correctly?
Correct. So another way to say that is when you take control of the banking function and you use the IBC system, everything that you run through that system over time, about 20 years, it's not an immediate gratification play here where it's like the next year, 2 years, or 5 years, long term. So everything you run through that system over about a 20-year period all comes back to you. So if you spend $220,000 on 4 trucks, but at the end of that 20 years, you have $220,000 in your banking system, how much did those trucks actually cost you?
I can even do that math. $0. 4
Zero,
trucks for $0.
right? 0. I mean, they're essentially free. So everything you run through this system over time comes back to you like it never left your family. And kind of how it does that is what I just showed before, where you're parking your money inside of that policy and you're using another system to finance it, and your money is growing uninterrupted, compounded. I think we just showed one vehicle over that 20 years, it grew to 109,000. So this is running 4 of them through there, growing to basically $220,000. So this is why everyone needs to take control of the banking function in your life, is to start recouping that money, running your life. It doesn't have to be a truck. That's why they call it an infinite banking concept. It's infinite. It can be college, vacations, cell phone bills, everything that runs through your household, runs through your checkbook, runs through your family, and then leads your family forever. The idea is recouping that money inside of this system. So over time, that money never leaves your family.
So my mind, Mike, goes back to when you first started teaching me about this. So for those of you that don't know, Mike's kind of my godfather for IBC. He doesn't like that term, but I use it because one, it gets a rise out of him, but two, it's also accurate. But when he started talking about this, this illustration was a hard stop for me. No way, not happening. There's no way you can tell me that I spend $220,000 over the course of 20 years. So it's not immediate. It's not immediate gratification. But over the course of 20 years, I would have that $220,000 back in my account. I'm here to tell you that's accurate. We use these now in my family. We have several policies. We'll get into all that into other episodes. But what I am telling you is this is accurate. Other episodes will go through how this works. But for right now, do some research. Look this up. Don't take Dave's word for it. Especially don't take Mike's word for it. No, I'm teasing. But do your own research. First, start comparing what the banks are doing with your money. This fractional reserve banking, they're making a bunch of money off of the hard-earned income that you have. Do some research on that and then start doing your own research comparing what an IBC policy can do in your own life. These are some high claims that Mike just made. He is of the highest esteem that he's not going to be up here to tell you something that isn't actually true. I think he has enough pride in himself that he's not going to get up here and tell you things that just blowing smoke at you, whatever. So I'm kind of sharing my own experience. This was a hard stop for me. And if we could talk forever about IBC in a single episode, we would. But the goal of this episode, one, is to talk about how the banking function is using your money. But two, this is how IBC can start bringing this money back to your family legacy. And not only does bring it back, but it stays there. Mike talked about uninterrupted compounding growth. So think about if you understand the exponential growth concept. I always talk, you can't see me if you're listening, but I'm using my hand. It's a hockey stick. Your money grows exponentially. So this thing gets down the road 20, 30, 40 years, and you're talking about legacy changing wealth that you're keeping and capturing in your family. So I went on a diatribe, Mike. I tend to do that. I'm sorry. But what you're saying is practically amazing, for lack of a better word. And that's what we want to do is we want to continue to get this information out there and get into people's hands. So after all that, is there anything you want to add or say differently?
Yeah, when I first was introduced to this as well, it was kind of mind blowing, kind of the too good to be true. Like, can this really be true? And, and I think the one thing that was really hard for me to wrap my mind around was the statement of everything you run through your system comes back to your family over time, like give or take 20 years or so. Uh, it never leaves your family. It was so hard for me it was such a mind blowing concept. It took me quite a long time for me to wrap my brain around it and understand the mechanics of how this worked. And then the other thing that is really somewhat frustrating for me was then I found out that all of the big banks, the Wells Fargo's, Bank of America, US Bank, JP Morgan, Chase, all these huge banks have been doing this for years. They do this same thing, not just the way they make money, but they have these specifically designed policies set up with, through all their employees, and they're funneling money through there, knowing that over time they're going to get it all back. So this exact concept where they're using this specially designed whole life insurance policies as a banking system, they've been using for years and years and years. There's actually, it's kind of limited to what you can find on the internet out there, but if you Google BOLI, BOLI, standing for bank owned life insurance, it's an acronym. It's a thing. And there's also COLI, company owned or corporate owned life insurance, where these Fortune 500 companies are doing the same thing. So it's not something like, it's too good to be true. Why haven't I heard of it before? No one's doing this. All of the banks are doing this. All of the Fortune 500 companies are doing this. The millionaires, the super elites, the super wealthy, they've all been doing this for years and years. They don't want us to do it. They don't tell us about it on the you and me level because, again, they want us to go and finance our homes, our cars, our vacations through their banking system because
Sure.
obviously they're making a huge return. So this is a way that we can participate in this on the you and me level and start taking control of the banking function in our life. That's what we want you to do.
Man, we should start a podcast, Mike, because that was so well said that we need we need to get it out there to people. It's absolutely true. So, for sake of time, I'm gonna wrap it up here. But if this is of interest to you, give us a shout. This is who we are. We're just Mike and Dave. This is what we do. We help people, churches. I got a land investor that I'm working with right now. A company administrator. Mike's done, I don't know, lots and lots and lots of these. He's got stories galore. So hopefully we'll get to some of those. But my point is it's not a matter of and or. It's not like you have to give up something to do this. This is an addition to concept. But start recapturing that and let us help you do that. That's what brings us the joy in all this is helping families change legacy. Start with 50 bucks a month. I don't know, who knows? But it can fit into whatever. But give us a call. We genuinely want to help. But as you go out from this episode, start looking at what the banks are doing with your money. Start doing some research, digging into it. Start looking at what IBC can do in comparison to that. And if you need help with that, that's what we're here to do. If you don't get a policy, it's not a big deal to us. We just want to make sure this information gets out. But I would encourage you to start doing a comparison. But that, yeah, I just leave with we're here to help, and that's what we want to do. Mike, any last words before we end the episode?
Yeah, one of the things you just mentioned, like it's not an either or. This is an in addition to kind of process. For example, let's say you have, $50,000 cash and you want to buy a truck, and it's like, well, okay, should I start my banking system for my family, or should I take this money and go buy the truck or go on vacation, or I need to do
Yeah,
this and that or whatever? I mean, life happens, and there's things that you need to
sure.
do with that money. It's not, should I do the IBC policy, the family banking system, or should I do B, what I really need to do with that money? It's in addition to, put it inside of your banking system where it's there forever, and it will earn interest, earn income, and be available for your family for generations to come. And then go out and you can borrow against that through the insurance company and go out and buy the truck or buy the land or whatever it is. Do that versus if you just take that money and write a check for whatever that is, that money, it's gone forever. It leaves your family forever. So you can start small, start putting your money inside of your family banking system where it will benefit you for generations to come. And then you can go and do those other things that you need to do. So,
Just to sum up, and we'll end with this: do both. Do both. And that's the beauty of this IBC. You can do both. So with that, we got a lot more episodes. Keep coming back. If you wouldn't mind, like, subscribe. It just helps and generate awareness, for lack of a better term. And I don't understand all the ins and outs of that. We're just a couple of guys trying to get information out there. But if you would do that, that does help out. So like, subscribe, and be back for the next episode.